A teenage king's coronation feast ended in chaos when he vanished with his young wife and her mother, only for a furious bishop to drag him from their company. One famous queen, Eleanor of Aquitaine, married 2 kings, was accused of sleeping with her own uncle, and then got locked up by her second husband for over a decade. Another king's passionate bond with a male favorite ignited such fury in his queen and nobles that it sparked a civil war, his forced abdication, and one of history's most grisly alleged assassinations. 2 lovers caught in the act and slain by the woman's husband, who was also the man's brother, found their tragic tale immortalized in Dante's Inferno. A celebrated Andalusian poet king and his best friend, also a poet, both fell for the same captivating woman, a former slave who became queen, a situation that ultimately shattered their friendship and led to a heartbreaking betrayal. Number 10. The king, his underage bride, and her ambitious mother. Picture this. It's 956 AD in England. Young King Eadwig, handsome and barely a man at around 16, is being crowned. This should be a solemn, grand occasion. But Eadwig had other things on his mind. Specifically, a girl named Ælfgifu. Ælfgifu was of noble birth, and Eadwig was clearly smitten. So smitten, in fact, that he'd already married her, or was about to, even though she was likely very young, possibly too young by church rules, and critically, too closely related to him. The church had strict rules about marrying relatives, even distant ones. Their union was controversial from the get-go. During his coronation feast, a pivotal event for any new king, Eadwig decided he'd had enough of the formalities. He got up and left the hall full of powerful nobles and churchmen. Where did he go? He went to a private chamber to be with Ælfgifu and her mother, Æthelgifu. Some accounts suggest the scene was less than decorous. One later, very hostile, source written by a monk, claimed the 2 women were trying to inveigle the young king and that crowns were tossed on the floor. The nobles were not amused. They felt snubbed. This was a serious breach of royal etiquette and showed disrespect to the powerful men who helped run the kingdom. 2 very important figures, Dunstan, the abbot of Glastonbury, and later a saint, and Koenig, bishop of Lichfield, were sent to fetch him. According to Dunstan's first biographer, they found Eadwig in a compromising situation with the Ælfgifu and Æthelgifu. Dunstan, reportedly furious, physically, dragged the young king back to the banquet. You can imagine the scene. A king, meant to be dignified, being manhandled by a churchman. It was a major scandal. Ælfgifu, Ælfgifu's mother, seems to have been a driving force. She was ambitious and saw a great opportunity through her daughter. She became a powerful figure at court, witnessing charters and receiving grants of land. Some historians suggest she might have been trying to secure her family's position, perhaps even hoping Ælfgifu would bear a royal heir. But the powerful church faction, led by Archbishop Oda of Canterbury, Dunstan's ally, had had enough. Around 958, Oda forcibly separated Eadwig and Ælfgifu. The official reason given was that they were too closely related. Consanguinity, Ælfgifu, was exiled. Some accounts, written by those who disliked her and her mother, even claim she was branded on the face and sent to Ireland, though this might be exaggeration or propaganda. Eadwig didn't live much longer. He died in 959 AD, still a teenager, under circumstances that are not entirely clear, but likely from illness. His reign was short and troubled, largely overshadowed by this scandal and his conflicts with powerful churchmen and nobles, including his own brother Edgar, who took over half the kingdom before Eadwig's death. Ælfgifu's fate after her exile is uncertain. This tangled situation involving a young king, his bride, her influential mother, and disapproving church authorities created a deeply complicated power struggle with very personal undertones. Number 9. The poet king, his queen, and his best friend Betrayal in Al-Andalus. In 11th century Al-Andalus, the Islamic-ruled part of Iberia, Seville was a city of culture, poetry, and power. Its ruler was Al-Mu'tamid ibn Abbad, himself a renowned poet. He was known for his charm, his artistic talent, and his sometimes ruthless political maneuvering. Al-Mu'tamid had a very close friend, a companion from his youth named Ibn Ammar. Ibn Ammar was also a brilliant poet, witty and ambitious. They were like brothers, sharing verses, dreams, and political schemes. Ibn Ammar rose to become Al-Mu'tamid's Grand Vizier, his chief minister. Their bond was legendary. Then came Rumaykiyya. The story, possibly romanticized over time, goes that Al-Mu'tamid was walking by the Guadalquivir River with Ibn Ammar. Inspired by the wind rippling the water, Al-Mu'tamid improvised a line of poetry. The wind has turned the river into a coat of mail. He challenged Ibn Ammar to complete the couplet. Before Ibn Ammar could respond, a voice from a nearby group of women called out the perfect second line. What a coat of mail, if only it would not freeze. The voice belonged to a young slave woman, Æthelgifu, also known as Rumaykiyya, because she worked for a man named Rumayk. Al-Mu'tamid was instantly captivated by her beauty and her quick poetic wit. He bought her, freed her, and married her. She became his beloved queen, and he even adopted the kunya, a type of honorific name, Al-Mu'tamid ala Allah, with Mu'tamid being a play on her name, Æthelgifu, signifying his reliance on her. Their love story became famous, filled with anecdotes of his lavish efforts to please her. Here's where the triangle gets thorny. Some historical narratives and literary traditions suggest that Ibn Ammar also developed feelings for Rumaykiyya, or at least that his relationship with Al-Mu'tamid became strained because of the king's intense devotion to his queen. Rumaykiyya wielded considerable influence over Al-Mu'tamid. Ibn Ammar was a skilled politician, but also arrogant and made enemies. Eventually, he fell from grace. There were political reasons, certainly. He undertook a disastrous military campaign to capture Murcia, then rebelled against Al-Mu'tamid and tried to rule Murcia independently. He was captured and brought back to Seville in chains. Al-Mu'tamid initially seemed inclined to forgive his old friend. They had shared so much. But Rumaykiyya, according to some sources, urged the king not to pardon Ibn Ammar. Accounts differ on her motivations. Perhaps she saw him as a political threat, perhaps there was personal animosity, or perhaps she was fiercely protective of Al-Mu'tamid after Ibn Ammar's rebellion. There are also tales that Ibn Ammar had insulted Rumaykiyya or Al-Mu'tamid's family in poems during his rebellion, which would have been a grave offense. One story tells of Ælfgifu visiting Ibn Ammar in prison. Ibn Ammar pleaded for his life, reminding the king of their past friendship and shared poetic moments. Ælfgifu was moved, but then something snapped. In a fit of rage, perhaps fueled by the memory of betrayal, political necessity, or words from Rumaykiyya, himself picked up an axe and killed Ibn Ammar in his cell in 1086. The love between Ælfgifu and Rumaykiyya remained strong. They faced further tragedy when the Almoravids from North Africa conquered Al-Andalus. Ælfgifu lost his kingdom and was exiled to Aghmat in Morocco with Rumaykiyya and their children, where he died in poverty. The story of their love and the broken friendship with Ibn Ammar became a poignant tale of passion, poetry, and betrayal. Number 8. The Mad King, His Queen, and the Ambitious Brother-in-Law. France in the late 14th and early 15th centuries was a tough place. The 100 Years' War with England raged on and off, and the country was internally divided. At the center of this was King Charles VI, who earned the unfortunate nickname Charles the Mad. Charles VI ascended the throne as a young man and initially showed promise, being called Charles the Well-Loved. He married Isabeau of Bavaria in 1385. Isabeau was beautiful and over time became a politically significant figure, especially as her husband's mental health deteriorated. The king's first major psychotic episode occurred in 1392. While on a military campaign, he suddenly, without warning, attacked his own men, killing several knights before being subdued. From then on, his life was punctuated by periods of intense madness. Sometimes he didn't recognize his own wife or children. He would run wildly through the palace, refuse to bathe for months, and sometimes believed he was made of glass and would shatter if touched. During the king's lucid moments he could rule, but when he was incapacitated, a power vacuum emerged. This is where Louis I, Duke of Orleans, Charles VI's younger brother, steps into the picture. Louis was handsome, charming, cultured, and very ambitious. He and Queen Isabeau became politically close, often working together on the regency councils that governed France during the king's illness. Their closeness, however, bred rumors. Nasty, persistent rumors. People whispered that Queen Isabeau and Louis of Orleans were lovers. Were they true? It's hard to say definitively. Medieval chroniclers were often biased, and Isabeau, as a foreign queen from Bavaria, and a woman wielding political power, was an easy target for slander, especially from factions who opposed Louis of Orleans. The political context is crucial. Louis of Orleans was locked in a bitter power struggle with his cousin John the Fearless, Duke of Burgundy. They vied for control of the government and the royal finances. Accusing Louis of an affair with the Queen was a potent political weapon for the Burgundian faction. It painted Louis as immoral and Isabeau as an adulterous queen, undermining their authority and legitimacy. Some sources claim that Isabeau lavished money on Louis, and that they spent a great deal of time together. The contemporary writer Jean Froissart noted Isabeau and Louis' enjoyment of courtly festivities. Later, more hostile chroniclers, particularly those aligned with the Burgundians, were much more explicit in their accusations of an affair. One monk, the Religieux de Saint-Denis, who was generally well-disposed towards the royal family, wrote about Isabeau and Louis's shared governance and close relationship, but was more circumspect about an affair. However, the perception of an affair was damaging enough. The situation became even more complicated because Isabeau had many children, and there were even whispers, though largely unsubstantiated, about the paternity of some of them, given the king's frequent incapacitation. These rumors were politically explosive. The rivalry between Louis of Orleans and John the Fearless culminated in tragedy. In 1407, John the Fearless had Louis of Orleans brutally assassinated in the streets of Paris. This murder plunged France into a civil war between the Armagnac faction, supporters of Orleans, and the Burgundian faction, further weakening the country in its fight against England. Isabeau of Bavaria's reputation suffered greatly, both at the time and in later history. She was often blamed for France's woes, depicted as extravagant, promiscuous, and politically treacherous. The rumored love triangle, whether real or not, played a significant role in the political turmoil and propaganda of the era, highlighting the destructive mix of personal relationships, mental illness, and raw political ambition at the French court. Number 7. The Warrior Queen, Her Hated Husband, and Her Many Troubles. Urraca of Leon and Castile was one of the most powerful women in 12th century Europe. She inherited the throne in 1109, becoming queen regnant of a vast kingdom in what is now Spain. Her life was a whirlwind of marriages, political alliances, rebellions, and almost constant warfare. Love, or at least marriage, was very much a political tool, and for Urraca, it often led to chaos. Urraca's first husband was Raymond of Burgundy, a French nobleman. They had a son, Alfonso, the future Alfonso VII. Raymond died before Urraca became queen. Upon her father, Alfonso VI's death, the dying king and his nobles arranged for Urraca to marry Alfonso I of Aragon, known as the Battler. This marriage was meant to unite the Christian kingdoms of Leon, Castile, and Aragon-Navarre against the Almoravids, Muslim rulers who controlled southern Iberia. It was a disaster from the start. Urraca and Alfonso the Battler were both strong-willed, fiery personalities. They clashed almost immediately. Alfonso was a warrior, often crude and dismissive of Urraca's authority as queen in her own right. He tried to sideline her, promote Aragonese men in Castilian and Leonese courts, and treated her harshly. Chronicles report mutual dislike and violent arguments. Sources say he even physically abused her. She was the established queen. He was a foreign king trying to assert dominance. This marriage was so bad that it sparked civil wars. Many of Urraca's most powerful nobles, particularly from Castile and Leon, couldn't stand Alfonso the Battler. They rose in rebellion, often with Urraca's tacit or open support. She wanted him out. Into this mess steps Count Gomez Gonzalez. He was a powerful Castilian nobleman, one of Urraca's staunchest supporters against Alfonso the Battler. And according to some contemporary chronicles, like the Historia Compostelana, he was also Urraca's lover. He championed her cause, fought for her, and seemed to have a close personal relationship with her. This alleged affair further infuriated Alfonso the Battler, and complicated the already tangled political situation. If Urraca was involved with one of her own powerful vassals while married to the King of Aragon, it was a direct challenge to her husband's honor and authority, quite apart from the political rebellion. The Historia Compostelana also mentions another nobleman, Count Pedro González de Lara, as becoming Urraca was killed in battle in 1111 at Candespina. Fighting against Alfonso the Battler's forces, ironically, Henry of Portugal, Urraca's half-brother-in-law, was also involved in these complex shifting alliances. Pedro de Lara became a very influential figure at Urraca's court, and they had at least 2 children together. This relationship also caused political problems, as some nobles resented Lara's power. Urraca's marriage to Alfonso the Battler was eventually annulled by the Pope in 1114 on grounds of consanguinity. They were distant cousins, but the conflict didn't just stop. They continued to fight over territory and influence. Urraca's life was a constant struggle to maintain her authority as queen. She faced opposition from her husband, from some of her nobles, from her half-sister Teresa of Portugal, and even at times from her own son Alfonso Raymondez, who was promoted as a rival claimant to the throne by some factions. Her romantic relationships, whether with Gómez González or Pedro de Lara, were intertwined with these power struggles. They were her allies in a dangerous world, but these relationships also gave her enemies ammunition. Urraca navigated these complex personal and political webs with remarkable resilience until her death in 1126. Her reign shows how love, loyalty, and ambition could create an incredibly volatile mix for a medieval queen. Number 6. The Kiss That Led to Hell. This is one of the most famous tragic love stories from the Middle Ages, immortalized by Dante Alighieri in his Divine Comedy. It's a tale of forbidden love, betrayal, and swift, brutal revenge, all set in 13th century Italy. The protagonists are Francesca da Rimini and Paolo Malatesta. Francesca was the daughter of Guido I de Polenta, Lord of Ravenna. Around 1275, for political reasons, to seal a peace treaty after a period of conflict, Francesca was married to Giovanni Malatesta, also known as Gianciotto, Crippled John. Ganciotto was the son of Malatesta da Verruccio, Lord of Rimini. He was known as a brave soldier, but was also described as deformed and ill-tempered. Paolo Malatesta was Gianciotto's younger brother. Unlike Gianciotto, Paolo was handsome, charming, and cultured. He was known as Il Bello, the Handsome. He too was married to Orabili Beatrice, Countess of Ghiaggiolo, and they had children. The exact details of how Francesca and Paolo began their affair are shrouded in the mists of romantic legend, heavily influenced by Dante's account. According to the story, Francesca fell in love with Paolo. Some later romantic versions of the tale even suggest that Paolo was sent to Ravenna to marry Francesca by proxy, as her intended husband, Gianciotto, was too uncomely, and Francesca believed Paolo was her actual husband to be only discovering the truth after the wedding. This part is likely a later embellishment to make the story even more tragic. What is widely accepted, thanks to Dante and later commentators, is that Francesca and Paolo did embark on a secret love affair. Dante, in Canto V of the Inferno, has Francesca tell him how their love ignited. She says they were reading a romance story together, a popular Arthurian tale about Lancelot and Guinevere, specifically how Lancelot first kissed Guinevere. That day we read no further, Francesca says, implying that the story inspired them to act on their own feelings. The line, Galeato fu libro e chi lo scris. A pander was the book, and he who wrote it became famous. Their affair continued for some time, but secrets in noble households were hard to keep. Eventually, Gianciotto discovered them. The most common version of the story is that he found them together in Francesca's bedroom. Enraged by the betrayal from both his wife and his brother, Gianciotto drew his sword and killed them both on the spot. This likely happened sometime between 1283 and 1285. Dante places Paolo and Francesca in the second circle of hell, reserved for the lustful, who are eternally buffeted by a violent storm, symbolizing the way they were swept away by their passions. Despite them being in hell, Dante portrays them with great sympathy, even fainting from pity after hearing Francesca's story. The historical core is that Francesca and Paolo were killed by Gianciotto. The exact circumstances, the reading the book detail, are part of the literary tradition that grew around the event, primarily thanks to Dante. Giovanni Boccaccio, writing in the 14th century, also recounted the story in his commentary on Dante's Inferno, adding more details, some of which may be romanticized. This love triangle is a powerful example of how a real-life tragedy, rooted in political marriage and human passion, became a timeless legend of forbidden love and its devastating consequences. The image of the lovers, united even in death and eternal punishment, has captivated artists and writers for centuries. Number 5. The King, His Favorite, and the She-Wolf Queen. Edward II of England, who reigned from 1307 to 1327, had a very difficult time as king. Many of his troubles stemmed from his intense and controversial relationships with certain male favorites, particularly Piers Gaveston. This created a toxic triangle with his wife, Isabella of France. Edward was married to Isabella, daughter of the powerful King Philip IV of France, in 1308. It was a political match, as many royal marriages were. Isabella was beautiful, intelligent, and initially seemed to tolerate her husband's ways. But Edward's devotion to Piers Gaveston overshadowed everything. Gaveston was a Gascon knight of relatively humble birth, who had been a companion to Edward since Edward was Prince of Wales. Edward doted on Gaveston, showering him with titles like Earl of Cornwall, a title usually reserved for royalty, lands, and influence. This caused immense resentment among the English nobility. They saw Gaveston as an upstart, arrogant and greedy, who monopolized the king's affections and political patronage. Chroniclers of the time noted the king's inordinate affection for Gaveston. Some sources explicitly suggest a homosexual relationship, while others focus on the political disruption caused by such blatant favoritism. The barons forced Edward to exile Gaveston multiple times. Each time, Edward was heartbroken and worked tirelessly to bring him back. When Gaveston was in England, he often behaved provocatively, giving mocking nicknames to powerful earls, further inflaming their hatred. Queen Isabella, too, found herself slighted. Gaveston seemed to take precedence over her in the king's affections and at court. There were reports that royal jewels meant for the queen were given to Gaveston. Her own father, the King of France, became concerned about her treatment. The conflict with the barons over Gaveston led to political instability and even civil strife. In 1312, a group of angry barons led by Thomas, Earl of Lancaster, Edward's cousin, captured Gaveston and after a summary trial, had him executed. Edward was devastated and enraged, and never forgave those responsible. After Gaveston's death, Edward eventually found new favorites, most notably Hugh Despenser the Younger. The Despensers, father and son, became incredibly powerful and rapacious, alienating much of the kingdom, including Queen Isabella. Hugh Despenser the Younger seemed to replace Gaveston in Edward's affections and political confidence, and Isabella reportedly despised him. She felt her position as queen was undermined. Her lands were confiscated by the Despensers, and she was increasingly isolated. This is where the triangle with Isabella truly exploded. In 1325, Isabella was sent to France on a diplomatic mission. Once there, she refused to return to England as long as the Despensers remained in power. And in France, she found a new ally, and by all accounts a lover, Roger Mortimer, a powerful English marcher lord who had been exiled after rebelling against Edward and the Despensers. Together, Isabella and Mortimer plotted an invasion of England. They gathered a small army and landed in England in 1326. They were met with widespread support from a populace tired of Edward's misrule and the Despensers' greed. Edward's regime crumbled. Hugh Despenser the Younger and his father were captured and brutally executed. Edward II himself was captured and forced to abdicate the throne in favor of his young son, Edward III. Isabella and Mortimer ruled as regents. What happened to Edward II next is grim. He was imprisoned and died in Berkeley Castle in 1327. The official cause was natural death, but rumors quickly spread that he had been murdered on the orders of Isabella and Mortimer. One particularly gruesome, though likely embellished story claimed he was killed by having a red-hot poker inserted into his anus, a symbolic death, if true, given the accusations about his relationships with Gaveston and Despenser. Isabella became known as the She-Wolf of France. Her affair with Mortimer and their seizure of power eventually led to their own downfall when young Edward III came of age, asserted his authority, had Mortimer executed in 1330, and placed his mother under a form of house arrest. The passionate loyalties and enmities in these relationships had toppled a king and reshaped English politics. Number 4. The King, His Queen, and the Fair Rosamund legend. Henry II of England was one of the most powerful rulers of the 12th century. His wife was Eleanor of Aquitaine, herself a formidable figure. Their marriage, while producing many children, including future kings Richard I and John, was stormy and filled with political maneuvering and personal tensions. And one of the most famous sources of that tension, at least in legend, was Henry's love for a woman named Rosamund Clifford. Rosamund, often called Fair Rosamund, was the daughter of a marcher lord, Walter de Clifford. She became Henry II's mistress. When exactly their affair began is uncertain, but it seems to have become public knowledge around 1174, a time when Henry's relationship with Queen Eleanor was at a very low point. Eleanor had supported their sons in a major rebellion against Henry in 1173 to 1174. After Henry suppressed the revolt, he had Eleanor imprisoned She would remain his captive in various castles for most of the next 15 years. With Eleanor out of the way, Henry's relationship with Rosamund became more open. Unlike many royal mistresses who were kept discreetly, Rosamund was acknowledged, though not flaunted in a way that gave her official standing. Henry made grants to her family and to Godstone Nunnery in Oxfordshire, where she would later be buried. The actual historical details about Rosamund are relatively sparse. She was real. She was Henry's mistress, and she died young, around 1176, only a couple of years after her relationship with the king became widely known. She was buried at Godstone Nunnery, initially in the choir of the church, a place of honor. However, legends quickly grew up around Fair Rosamund, particularly concerning Queen Eleanor's supposed jealousy and actions. These stories, which became very popular in later centuries, painted a much more dramatic picture than the historical record strictly supports. One famous legend claimed that Henry built a secret labyrinth, or bower at Woodstock Palace, to hide Rosamund from the Queen. Eleanor, in these tales, managed to find her way through the maze, possibly by following a telltale thread, and confronted her rival. The most dramatic versions have Eleanor forcing Rosamund to choose between a dagger and a cup of poison, with Rosamund choosing, or being forced to take, the poison. There is no contemporary historical evidence that Eleanor poisoned Rosamund. Rosamund likely died of natural causes. The story of the labyrinth and the poisoned cup appears in later chronicles and ballads, becoming a fixed part of English folklore. It tapped into popular perceptions of Eleanor as a strong, possibly vengeful woman, and the romantic archetype of the tragic, beautiful mistress. What is historical is that after Rosamund's death, Hugh of Lincoln, the respected Bishop of Lincoln, visited Godstone Nunnery in 1191. Henry II had died in 1189, and Eleanor was by then freed and influential as Queen Mother. Bishop Hugh was scandalized to find Rosamund's tomb in such a prominent place in the church, adorned with silks and lamps as if she were a saint. He ordered her remains to be removed from the church and reburied outside, stating it was improper for a woman of her reputation, as a king's mistress, to be honored within the sacred space, lest Christian religion should be held in contempt. The nuns, however, reportedly still cherished her memory and reburied her in their chapter house with an epitaph. The triangle here is potent less in documented direct confrontations between Eleanor and Rosamund, and more in what Rosamund represented: Henry's infidelity, Eleanor's constrained position while imprisoned, and the romantic, tragic folklore that later demonized Eleanor and sainted Rosamund. It speaks volumes about how personal relationships of kings were viewed and mythologized. Number 3. The Queen who ditched one king for another, sparking an empire. Eleanor of Aquitaine was without a doubt one of the most extraordinary women of the Middle Ages. She was Duchess of Aquitaine in her own right, a vast and wealthy territory in southwestern France. Her life involved 2 royal marriages, the Second Crusade, numerous children who became kings or queens, political intrigue, rebellion, and decades of influence. Her first major triangle involved her first husband, King Louis VII of France, and then very quickly her second husband, Henry Plantagenet, who became King Henry II of England. Eleanor married Louis, then heir to the French throne, in 1137. She was about 15. He was about 17. It was a huge political match. Aquitaine was a massive prize, and by marrying Eleanor, Louis brought it under the French crown's influence. However, Louis was very devout, almost monk-like in his piety. while Eleanor was high-spirited, cultured, and accustomed to the more vibrant and liberal courts of southern France. They were, by many accounts, a mismatch in temperament. Things came to a head during the Second Crusade, 1147 to 1149. Eleanor, controversially for the time, insisted on accompanying Louis, bringing her own Aquitanian vassals. During their stay in Antioch, ruled by Eleanor's dashing uncle Raymond of Poitiers, rumors flew. Some chroniclers suggested that Eleanor and Raymond became too close, implying an incestuous affair. John of Salisbury, a contemporary, wrote that Raymond hoped to keep the queen with him, with the king's consent or without it. He also noted Louis became violently suspicious of his wife's affection for Raymond. Whether an affair actually happened is debated by historians. Some argue it was political maneuvering by Raymond or slander against Eleanor. Regardless, the accusations severely damaged her marriage to Louis. The crusade was a military failure, and the royal couple returned to Europe, barely speaking. They had 2 daughters, Marie and Alix, but no sons, which was a major problem for the French succession. By 1152, the marriage was beyond repair. It was annulled on the grounds of consanguinity. They were too closely related, a common pretext for politically convenient annulments. Here's where the triangle with Henry comes in sharply. Just 2 months after the annulment, Eleanor did something astonishing. She married Henry Plantagenet, Duke of Normandy and Count of Anjou. Henry was 11 years younger than her, energetic, ambitious, and a political rival to her ex-husband, Louis VII. This marriage was a political earthquake. By marrying Henry, Eleanor took Aquitaine with her. Suddenly, Henry controlled a vast swathe of France, Normandy, Anjou, Maine, Touraine, and now Aquitaine, far more French territory than Louis VII himself. When Henry became King Henry II of England in 1154, their combined territories formed the sprawling Angevin Empire. This created an intense, decades-long rivalry between the kings of England and France. Louis VII felt utterly betrayed and outmaneuvered. He had lost a wife and a massive duchy to his main competitor. He even tried to contest the legality of Eleanor's remarriage and her rights to Aquitaine, but to no avail. Eleanor and Henry had 8 children together, including 5 sons, though only Richard the Lionheart and John would become kings of England. Their early marriage seemed passionate, but it too soured over time due to Henry's infidelities, like with Rosamund Clifford, and his autocratic style of rule, which often clashed with Eleanor's desire to protect Aquitaine's autonomy and her son's inheritances. This led to Eleanor supporting her son's rebellions against Henry, for which he imprisoned her for about 15 years. This particular triangle, Eleanor, Louis, and Henry, wasn't just about personal feelings, though those were certainly involved. It was a guilty drama that redrew the map of Western Europe and set the stage for centuries of conflict between England and France. Eleanor's bold move from one king's bed and throne to another's was a medieval power play of the highest order. Number 2, the potion, the sword, and the impossible love. The story of Tristan and Isolde, or Isolde, is one of the great romantic tragedies of medieval literature. A tale of adulterous love so powerful it defied loyalty, marriage, and even death. While its origins are likely in Celtic legend, it was popularized by French poets in the 12th century and spread throughout Europe. influencing art and literature for centuries. The core characters are Tristan, a brave and noble knight; Isolde the Fair, an Irish princess renowned for her beauty and healing skills; and King Mark of Cornwall, Tristan's uncle and king. The story begins with Tristan, an orphan being raised at the court of his uncle, King Mark. Tristan proves himself a valiant warrior. In one adventure, he travels to Ireland to seek a bride for King Mark, aiming to secure peace between Cornwall and Ireland. The chosen bride is Isolde. On the voyage back to Cornwall, tragedy strikes in a uniquely romantic way. Isolde's mother had entrusted Isolde's maid, Brangæne, with a love potion intended for Isolde and King Mark to drink on their wedding night to ensure their love and a happy marriage. But, by mistake, or fate, as some versions imply, Tristan and Isolde accidentally drink the potion together. They fall instantly and irrevocably in love, a passionate, all-consuming love that they know is forbidden. Isolde is betrothed to Tristan's uncle and king. Tristan owes his uncle loyalty and fealty. Despite their desperate love, Isolde marries King Mark. However, she and Tristan cannot stay away from each other. They begin a secret affair, filled with clandestine meetings, narrow escapes, and constant fear of discovery. They use tricks and deceptions to be together, aided by loyal servants like Brangæne, who, in some versions, even takes Isolde's place in King Mark's bed on the wedding night to hide the fact that Isolde is not a virgin, having already consummated her love with Tristan. King Mark, though often portrayed as a good and trusting man, eventually becomes suspicious. His courtiers, jealous of Tristan or genuinely concerned about the Queen's honor, spy on the lovers and try to expose them. There are many episodes where Tristan and Isolde are nearly caught, or are caught, leading to Tristan's banishment or Isolde's trial, like an ordeal by fire which she cleverly passes through a verbal trick. The love potion is often seen as the culprit for their irresistible passion. Absolving them somewhat of moral blame, they can't help themselves. Yet their love is also depicted as deeply genuine and transcendent. The triangle is agonizing for all three. King Mark loves his nephew Tristan like a son, and his wife, Isolde. Discovering their betrayal causes him immense pain. Tristan is torn between his overwhelming love for Isolde and his duty and affection for his uncle. Isolde is trapped between her love for Tristan and her obligations as queen. The ending of the story is invariably tragic, though details vary in different versions. In one common version, Tristan, wounded by a poisoned weapon while adventuring abroad, sends for Isolde as she is the only one who can heal him. He arranges a signal. If the ship carrying her back is successful, it will fly white sails, if not black sails. Tristan's own jealous wife from a later marriage of convenience, known as Isolde of the White Hands, sees the ship approaching with white sails but lies to the dying Tristan, telling him the sails are black. Tristan, believing Isolde the Fair is not coming and has abandoned him, dies of grief. When Isolde arrives and finds Tristan dead, she dies of a broken heart beside him. King Mark, learning the truth about the love potion and the depth of their tragic love, often is depicted as forgiving them in death, sometimes burying them side by side. Legend says that a hazel tree and a honeysuckle, or two rose bushes, grew from their graves, intertwining their branches, so that they could not be separated, symbolizing their eternal bond. This legendary triangle explores themes of irresistible passion versus societal duty, love, betrayal, and fate, leaving a lasting mark on Western ideas of romantic love. Number 1. The King, the Queen, and the Perfect Knight. Perhaps the most famous love triangle in all of Western literature is that of King Arthur, Queen Guinevere, and Sir Lancelot. This story, developed and popularized by medieval writers, particularly French Romance authors like Chrétien de Troyes in the late 12th century and later Sir Thomas Malory in the 15th century's Le Morte d'Arthur, became the cornerstone of Arthurian legend. King Arthur is the legendary British leader, founder of the Knights of the Round Table, and a symbol of ideal kingship and chivalry. He marries Guinevere, a beautiful and noble princess. Their court at Camelot is meant to be a beacon of justice, honor, and knightly virtue. Sir Lancelot du Lac is Arthur's greatest knight, the most skilled in combat, the most chivalrous, and Arthur's closest friend and most trusted companion. He is the epitome of knightly perfection. The complication arises when Lancelot and Guinevere fall deeply in love. This love is adulterous and treasonous, a betrayal of their king and friend. Their affair is passionate but also tormented, as they are both aware of the wrong they are doing and the potential devastation it could cause. For a long time their love remains a secret, or at least unproven, though suspicions and rumors abound at court. Some knights, like Sir Agravaine and Sir Mordred, Arthur's nephew, or in some versions his illegitimate son, are jealous of Lancelot or seek to cause trouble for Arthur. They actively try to expose the affair. The love between Lancelot and Guinevere is often portrayed as a tragic consequence of courtly love ideals, where a knight's devotion to his lady could reach extreme, sometimes adulterous heights. Lancelot's prowess in tournaments is often inspired by Guinevere. She is his lady, his inspiration, but also his downfall. The discovery of their affair is the catalyst for the destruction of Camelot and the Fellowship of the Round Table. In Malory's version, Agravaine and Mordred finally trap Lancelot in Guinevere's chambers. Lancelot fights his way out, killing Agravaine and several other knights in the process. This forces Arthur's hand. He cannot ignore such a public scandal and the deaths of his knights. Guinevere is condemned to be burned at the stake for treason and adultery. Lancelot, true to his love, rescues her, but in the battle he inadvertently kills Sir Gareth and Sir Gaheris, two noble knights who were Gawaine's brothers, and who were unarmed at the time. This turns Sir Gawaine, previously an ally of Lancelot, into his bitterest enemy, demanding vengeance. The kingdom is plunged into civil war. Arthur is forced to pursue Lancelot to France. While Arthur is away, Mordred seizes the throne and tries to force Guinevere to marry him. Arthur rushes back to Britain to confront Mordred. This leads to the final, devastating battle of Comlan. Arthur kills Mordred, but is himself mortally wounded. The Round Table is shattered, and the ideal kingdom of Camelot comes to a bloody end. After Arthur's death, or his departure to Avalon to be healed, Guinevere, filled with remorse, retires to a nunnery at Amesbury to spend the rest of her life in penance. Lancelot, also grieving and repentant, becomes a hermit and priest. They meet one last time, but Guinevere urges him to leave and seek his own salvation. After her death, Lancelot buries her beside Arthur, or where Arthur is reputed to be buried, and dies himself shortly thereafter, consumed by sorrow and penance. This triangle is so compelling because it involves figures who are otherwise ideals of virtue. Arthur is the good king, Lancelot the perfect knight, Guinevere the noble queen. Their tragic flaw, the forbidden love, brings down everything they built. It explores themes of love, loyalty, betrayal, sin, forgiveness, and the destructive consequences of human passion, even among the noblest of people. While legendary, the story of Arthur, Guinevere, and Lancelot has resonated through centuries as the ultimate tale of a kingdom undone by a love it could not contain.